with my dear colleague and friend, Ann Bowers-Evangelista. And this is CDR Live. I'm Nancy Parsons, president of CDR Companies, and I couldn't be more delighted for this discussion today. What I want to do first is introduce Ann to everyone, give you a little idea of her background, and it's amazing. And we'll also talk about her upcoming book and many other things. So Ann ignites passion, purpose, and clarity for executives and teams building long-term success. For over 2 decades, she's leveraged her experience as a psychologist, business and leadership expert, and endurance athlete to maximize human potential and business results. Ann seeks, or organization seeks Ann's hiring proficiency to select and develop high caliber talent and build great teams. As a coach, Ann's reflective abilities and goal orientation helps clients achieve outsized results. She is a licensed psychologist and a member of the American Psychological Association and several divisions. She's the managing director of the Alliance for Leadership Excellence, which is the Alexel group, which I'm a member of too, and was prior treasurer of the Society of Consulting Psychology. She is a member of APA's Leadership Institute for Women in Psychology. She's a certified Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder-centered coach, and she's completed J&J's corporate athlete program and CTI's coactive coach program. She's certified in multiple assessment tools, including CDR assessments, and uses these various tools for individuals and teams. Really exciting, I just find intriguing and exciting, is she's an Ironman triathlete and marathon runner. And she brings her high performance focus and results orientation to her work, family, and community. She's the proud spouse of a U.S. Air Force officer and volunteers for several nonprofits that support Washington, D.C.'s underserved and marginalized communities. And I am so excited to be with you, Ann, today. Thank you for joining me.
Wow. Thank you, Nancy, for this illustrious introduction.
And I left out the many companies you've worked for, but we could probably get it.
No, we don't need to go there. But thank you for such a warm intro. This is great.
Yeah, and I've known Ann for many years, and I'm just so delighted she's joining me today. And so I'm going to just start with kind of a basic question, if that's okay, or unless you want to add anything to your bio.
No, not at all. Thank you for it's a wonderful introduction. Thanks.
Okay, so I want to know what drew you into this profession that you're doing, in particularly coaching and executive development.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an interesting story because my interest in kind of helping people, as it were, started at age 11.
Wow.
I wanted to be a psychologist. It did help that I had a sister who was either already on her way to being a psychologist or was one. I don't remember.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. In the 6th grade, I had a sign on my desk that said Ann the Analyst, like Lucy. And so I could tell you at that time that I was going to be a clinical psychologist and that I had to get 3 degrees, even though I didn't know what that meant. So I came by it kind of honestly in some ways, this helping profession business. So I did get my undergrad and my doctorate in clinical psychology and an MBA simultaneously. When I was in grad school, I took an intro to organizational psychology class, and it really was like a total game changer. It was
great.
This moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. You know, working with leaders and HR departments and folks to really create change that you could see and experience as a clinician. Sometimes you don't know what happens to people.
Right.
And so that's really when I started pursuing consulting. And in fact, I got a concentration in consulting in grad school. So my first coaching client was in 1999. I was still in grad school, and it was a chief nursing officer at a hospital in Texas, actually.
Wow.
Bless that woman for being a saint.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's an interesting start. So I feel like what it's allowed me to do, having the clinical background, is still keep with the love that I have of being able to deliver value in one-on-one engagements, as well as smaller engagements versus kind of organizational psychology, surveys, et cetera. And it really kind of still meets that 11-year-old self desire to be helpful to people.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I share the love on the IO side too, the work that we do, just helping leaders, helping organizations. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, in your bio that I am like in awe of is your athleticism, your training, your dedication, your ability, you're a triathlon, Ironman woman. And I do remember once when we were visiting and you went to our club and you just swam and swam and swam. I mean, we did our whole workout and you were still swimming. That is what I remember. Okay. So tell us about that.
Sounds about right.
You being this endurance athlete. I mean, it's amazing as a woman and an executive coach. Like I said, I wish I had like 1/4 of that determination.
You absolutely do, Nancy. I have seen you both working out and pursuing your workouts, and I know you're no slouch. So thank you for that. And it's funny. I think you have your grandkids and your puppies, and I have bicycles and lots of running shoes. So these are my children in a way. So interestingly, I was always, I guess, athletic, but I wasn't a team sports person. So I did a few things, dabbled in high school, but I kind of got drawn to running and lifting weights, actually. Wow. And then I entered my first triathlon in 2002. I got tricked into it from a girlfriend of mine who ended up not doing it. And I ended up doing it. And I had no idea what I was doing. Everything was kind of pull myself up by the bootstraps. I really didn't know how to really swim before that. So I kind of taught myself how to swim and I hated it. I said, I have done one. I am done. I don't ever need to do another one. I cried when I finished, not because I was happy. Done. So what happened is a couple years later, I was living in Atlanta and I heard about this organization called Team in Training, which is a fundraising arm of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And they have this whole program where they help people with running or biking or triathlon learn how to do that event and raise money for their cause along the way. And it really spoke to me. And so I started getting involved then. I did an event in 2005 in Philadelphia and then continued being a part of Team in Training teams. And it just really stuck. It was the sport, but it was also the fundraising part. It gave it purpose, and being able to do it with other people was really meaningful to me.
Good. And do you think too, has it changed? I mean, how you feel, how you go about your work? I mean, I coach, as you do, a lot of people who get away from working out and that rigor. Do you think it's made a big difference in your life that way?
Absolutely. I really don't think it would be possible for me to do what I do professionally without it. It becomes a lot. And this from, being someone who works out yourself, the busier I am, the more important it is because it really helps ground me. It provides some reflection time. So there is no such thing as my professional life without my kind of athletic life. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Great. That's great. Well, like I said, it's amazing. And you need to keep posting about that. Let us know how you're doing because it's wonderful. Now, I do want to, I'll come back to a little bit more about you, but I want to make sure we really talk about your new books because I'm so excited with your new book coming out called, and I think you have the book there that you might show.
I have just a small, it's actually just a printout of the cover. So please don't, take it.
No, it looks great. The Endurance Leader. So, okay. So why don't you just tell us about the book? Why the book? What's it about? How's it going to help us and help leaders?
So the book is really intended to help kind of next gen executives and senior leaders really think about how they want to approach their leadership for the long term. So as we know, lots and lots of leaders are getting burnout. People are feeling more isolated, having a lot more mental health issues because we're just trying to kind of sprint all the time. And this book is a little bit of an antidote to that in that we're using principles from endurance athletics to help leaders build a way of thinking and a way of acting that really sustains them for the long term, that they can find motivating and energizing and remain consistent towards. And it really has to do with how they're actively thinking about how they want to show up as a leader, not just for today, but for the next several decades. So that's really and I'm happy to share more about those specifics.
Yeah. So, and now inside the book too, do you talk about some of your coaching clients? I mean, give us a little more. I want to learn more.
Yeah. So I actually developed a model, the Endurance Leader model, and there's 4 quadrants that are in the model. So the first is around what I call anchoring your mindset. The next is around I'm saying them sequentially, but they're interdependent. Excel in execution, forge discipline, and leverage support. And all of these concepts are things that really came from concepts that I understood as an endurance athlete, but never formulated the language around. And you know, what I've been seeing is that leaders, the leaders that I saw being successful over the long term were exhibiting the same kinds of behaviors that successful endurance athletes exhibit. So it was like, there's something here. And so I started really sketching it out. I did a lot of interviewing of leaders and athletes to really understand this relationship. So it wasn't just a concept, it was a concept as well. So, and I do have lots of examples in the book from both people I think of as good endurance leaders in the making, and some people who might be less than endurance leaders.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, and it's interesting, as you mentioned your model, one thing really struck me harder is because maybe it's one of the areas that is more difficult even for me is the discipline side. Yeah. And so, I mean, so I know some people are naturally just strong there. And then there's those of us who aren't as strong on that muscle of discipline, if you will.
It's a great point. Yeah. And I think that it's probably the term, I think both the term endurance itself, people go, because like when you think about what does endurance mean, it's like people associate it with like survival, right? So there's a little bit of that,
but I can understand them thinking that. I don't. I think of more sustainability, longer term success. That's how
being able to overcome hard things and being able to, and it's really about being able to find what drives you and what motivates you through those adversities, through those difficulties to help you, you know, get through that adversity and get to the other side and get to that proverbial finish line. But the discipline is the other piece. And there's a discipline. And I also introduced a term I call mental toughness. And again, terminology that people kind of go, whoa, you know, these are little challenging terms, but the whole notion of when you break down what is discipline, what I think most people will resonate with the notion that they do have discipline around things in their lives. When people automatically think, oh, we're talking about athletic discipline, I don't have that. And I want to make it abundantly clear, this book is not for athletes. It's for everyday people.
It's for everyone.
And yet most of the examples are from leaders. Certainly I throw in athletes as well to kind of help you make the connection of the concepts. But it really is about leaders, and leaders do tend to be disciplined about things, but it's about really actively thinking about the kinds of things that you want. And I did in one point, for example, I do a differentiation between resilience, grit, and mental toughness, which people often think of them as all being kind of the same thing. And the best way to differentiate those, for example, is to think of them as like resilience is kind of helping you with things that have happened in the past, right? It's about your ability to overcome adversities that have already happened. Grit is kind of this potential you have to be able to manage things in the future.
Okay.
And mental toughness is something you're exhibiting right now. It's a commitment to looking at things in certain ways. It has to do with preparation and planning. It isn't some gift that's come. It's just about how are you readying yourself for the inevitable challenges that are going to be out there? How much are you willing to push yourself out of your comfort zone just a little bit with your leadership? So for example, you might say, I want to be, more forthcoming in executive level meetings and be able to speak up more and feel like I have a voice at the table. And, a commitment you might make to yourself as well. I'm not in those meetings all that often, but maybe every day I could practice in a meeting positing a well-positioned question. That's an example of actually taking a step towards mental toughness, which is getting a little uncomfortable and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone so that when you do have those opportunities, or when something kind of comes your way that you weren't expecting, you're ready.
Absolutely. And it sounds like when I'm coaching folks around their risk factors, that's what we do is you've got to anticipate it. Like you said, these situations are tough for you. So how can you execute better instead of going quiet, or instead of, being afraid to speak up in the moment? It's that practice, having that plan. And so I think there's a parallel,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're bringing up a great point, which is that none of the concepts I'm bringing up are new, right? They're concepts that already exist, but it's putting them in this framework that I think for some people really resonates. And one thing I think is very important in this particular example, we're hearing a lot of people talking these days about knowing your why. And I talk about understanding your mission, right? And identifying your mission. And I talk about it a little differently than the why. But by spending time really understanding your ultimate mission, or what I sometimes call your headstone.
Sorry.
No worries.
I had it on silent.
Getting an emergency.
Well, I have
got an Amber Alert or something happening there.
Try to shut it off. I apologize. I should have shut it off, but I had it on silent. That was not silent.
Right.
Can I tell
that
you
would be those emergency alerts.
And you should know there's a murderer on the loose. It's not your regular Amber Alert. so I'll look out my window. No, I don't know where.
Okay. Well, that'll disrupt our day. Let's see if we can do some planning.
Yeah. So sorry.
That's all right. I was just saying that, this ultimate mission notion, and what I call your headstone goal, which is what is it I want to be known for? What am I uniquely on the planet to do? And when leaders can not only identify that, but actually working from that, bring it into their long, medium, and immediate term goals, people are a lot more motivated. That's intrinsic. It's intrinsically motivating. So when you can say at the end of the day, I got a little bit closer to what matters most to me today, you have a lot more energy and excitement about your leadership going forward. So
and the other thing it helps you with, I've always got this kind of in my mind, where are we going kind of thing, like you're describing. And it helps with the setbacks. It helps with the disappointments, or, things don't always go according to plan, but you're still undeterred because you're still on that road. Does that make sense? I mean, so I get it. I think it's so important. And I love here's the other thing. I think when you're providing a new framework that's usable, I think that for me is the best kind of book that you can write, because I remember one of my other favorite books many years ago, I think it was like 1980 something. I'm giving my, anyway, it was called,
you were 12. I get it. Yeah.
I was reading. Yes. I was reading when I was like in diapers. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. But it was called The Code. And it was the same thing. It provided for leaders the framework, an eight-step model, if you will. And it was by Matt Starsevich and Stephen Stoll. And actually Matt is one of our executive certified coaches to this day. But it was a framework for just how do you coach people? And for people that are more process oriented and everything, that 8-step model was fabulous. It worked for everybody because some of the human interactions and leadership in particular, what I like about your book, it can get messy or it can get confusing at times, or it can get like,
That's
it
right.
just can be weird. It's not the same as our technical aspects of our work, which are
That's
easy, right?
That's right. Like slot A into tab B, like this is like we're living in such a complex, unpredictable time, you know, and
Oh yeah.
if we're just constantly being kind of battered about by the winds of the moment, it's like being in a marathon when it's pouring rain and it's, you know, 1 minute and then it's 98 degrees and sunny the next minute, and you're like, I don't remember why I'm out here. This is just terrible, you know,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you want to quit. And when you have something that you can hang on to, it really matters. And I love what you're saying about the practicality. I am
Yeah.
very much kind of a practical, pragmatic person. And I
Absolutely.
encourage people to like use the book like a workbook. Each
Absolutely.
chapter has coaches' questions and a training plan. And so I'm, you know, really challenging people to take pieces and not even go through it because it's not a linear model. Like maybe you're like, hey, that whole, you know, discipline thing, I need to focus on that. Or maybe you're thinking about how can I use supports? How can I use, you know, I really need to take advantage of coaching resources, but I don't have access to a formal coach. Who could I use? Well, look at the chapter about making anybody a coach, right? Look
Right.
at chapters around, you know, falling in love with metrics. How can you use the things that you do have access to get yourself 1% closer to your goal, a la James Clear in Atomic Habits? 1%, you know, what's that 1%?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's great. And the idea to practical and practice these new things, these new behaviors, you know, to get them where they need to be. I'm really excited. In fact, you know, we have CDRU coach and we have learning resources that we link. We want to
Yeah.
link with a description. So we want to make sure after this
Thank you.
we do that when your book is ready. When do you expect the book to be released?
Yes, well, we're in the final throes of the editing at the moment. So I think by the fall, it should be ready and it will be available on wherever Amazon is sold, as they like to say. And I believe we'll be able to get your 99-cent Kindle version at the same time. So it'll be out in paperback and it'll also be in a Kindle version. And if I'm coming and speaking, you can expect to get a copy wherever we are. So
great. So you're going to be speaking engagements. Do you also do like workshops around this too? Will you?
Yeah, great question. I am getting more and more requests for both kind of cohort-based coaching, which is great. I'm building the course I have is really meant to coincide with the release of the book. And really exciting, particularly for these leaders in this, you know, I think about folks, particularly in kind of the VP, senior director space, who are maybe of young families, they're busy, you know, professionals, they have some leadership, but they're like, how am I going to do this for another 20 or 30 years, right? These are folks that are really drawn, but also seeing interest from leadership development initiatives, people, you know, organizations saying this is a really helpful resource for even some of our younger leaders so that they can be thinking about how to start their leadership with this way of thinking versus trying to kind of course correct once they're already potentially doing some behaviors they might not be helping them on their long-term leadership path. So yep, doing some speaking as well as some cohort-based coaching and one-on-one coaching.
Great. And I'll ask you now too. I mean, obviously people can find you where on LinkedIn. Do you also have a website?
I do. I have two websites at the moment. www.lumos.com, LUMOS.com is my main site, and www.theenduranceleader.com is coming soon. So both of those are places you can reach me. And of course, you can reach me on LinkedIn. You can also reach me on Instagram at Lumos_LLC. And
if you can't find her, I will direct you if you reach out to me as well. I will connect. Great. We talked about the presentations, in-house workshops. Tell me now, we'll go back a little bit now into your coaching practice, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So what do you enjoy most? What do you find most gratifying about the work that you're doing in coaching?
it's such a, Nancy, as a coach, like how gratifying it can be, right? To just be engaged with someone who you can see is really transforming. And I want to just share a story. This is also a story in the book.
Great.
You'll meet this individual in August when we're doing an Alexa presentation. He's a client named David. I have permission to use his name, and he's a marvel. He grew up in extreme poverty. He's actually Argentinian, but passes as white, which he says was a benefit to him. He was arrested 13 times by his 19th birthday and decided to become, he said, I am going to get out and become a criminal defense attorney and defend people like me, who is basically my crime was being poor. Yeah. And this is exactly what he's done. He is a very successful criminal defense attorney in Atlanta, was named the #1 lawyer in Atlanta by the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association last year. So anyway, David is is a wonderful client. And when we started working together, one of the things that we were talking a lot about is a concept I talk about in the book called the action reflection cycle. Certainly lots of people do reflection. It's been around a long time, but really pairing it with in the moment. And what David was struggling with is that he is a nonprofit focused on eliminating recidivism. And he had his audience to sell that program is judges, it's criminal justice, officials, it's police, all the people that his history had put him in touch with in a negative way. And so he came into these conversations often with a lot of emotion, pent up emotion from his past. And so he would easily get kind of triggered. And he really was like, this is getting in my way. And we started with some very small reflective activities so that he could stop and pause. And he came into a session, like, as he often does, just kind of bounding with energy and was like, Ann, this stuff really works. He's like, I felt myself starting to get triggered in this court case by this, criminal justice person. And he said, I paused and I just waited 4 seconds and I thought about that I was reacting to my past and not what was going on now. And he said, and I delivered this incredible argument. And he, those kinds of moments, Nancy, you've had them too. And there's just this aha for a human that he gets to carry. And, because I coach really a lot based on my understanding as a psychologist, I'm often inviting people to really think about what's the past messaging that's keeping people stuck. So once they're able to unlock that, they got the keys to the kingdom. They don't need, to go back to like, oh, if it's this situation, do this thing, right? The whole compendium of behaviors they can choose from. And so those kinds of things to me are so exciting because you see this person make a fun shift in how they're showing up in a positive way.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. That's really good. I love it. Yeah, when you see a shift, when you see a change, and even just that new sense of awareness of, oh, I'm doing this because, and I actually can change the future if I pull it back.
Yeah.
And I love the 4 seconds. I'm always take 3 deep breaths sort of person. Right. In that moment when you feel.
Well, we started with 10 seconds and he was like, oh, I can do it in 4.
Yeah, like that. But it's great. But I think the idea too is you helped him be aware, where is this coming from? From your past, from always feeling defensive and having to claw your way through. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to. You're in charge of your name and you can't look to people to kind of trigger you unnecessarily.
That's right. There's a great book. Sorry to interrupt you. One of my favorite books is a book by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy at Harvard called Immunity to Change. And it's a pretty deep book. It's very, it's a great team activity, but it takes a lot of work. And it's really about how we've developed these ways of wanting to create change, but also being rewarded for not changing these specific things and how they've helped us. And it isn't until we can recognize the ways those things have actually been useful, and that we're kind of both, they call it having one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake, and really, and really trying, so people are sometimes not successful because they are seeing the benefits that are kind of hidden in these behaviors. They theoretically want to change, but have trouble because they aren't recognizing the way they've been helping them.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, well, that was great. I'm looking forward to meeting him in August, you said, right?
Yeah, that's right. He's doing an Excel presentation with me. Yeah.
So, no, that was a perfect example. Now tell me though, and that was pretty tough, but you managed to, have you ever had, I know I have in coaching for over 25 years, a tough coaching case? Can you, really one that, or even, or what would you describe as a tough case? I mean, in your mind, you go in, you're like, really? Okay.
Right. Right. I mean, there's definitely the ones, and I don't know about you, but there are many, many times when I will immediately go, oh no, this is going to be so awful. And then I'm like, I know I've done it. It's happened enough times that I know that it's actually going to be great.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you have that initial things thinking this is going to be so hard. One of the parts of the book is around leveraging support. And I talk about utilizing coaching. And I ask people to really look at kind of whether they're ready for coaching or not, and kind of bring them through a process to really look at that. And I think that ultimately the most difficult is when somebody isn't really ready. And I think that can often be determined by the motivation you hear them talking about. So again, an example of a potential leader that I was going to work with, who her goal was to kind of manage everyone else's perceptions of her such that she could get a promotion. And that sent off a lot of red flags to me.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
Our ability to manage other people's perceptions is kind of like dancing to the tune in somebody else's head, right? Like I don't know what that means. And so really tried to find some ways to get her to express over the next couple of weeks that the motivation was internal, but each communication, both outward and with me, was really, again, it was more defensive. It was more externalized, right? If we aren't willing to look at how am I leading myself first, which is where the CDR comes in really helpful. So, to me, that's really the biggest challenge is if somebody isn't motivated, none of us can get them there. They might be motivated to not lose their job, but the work of coaching is way higher up on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right. And so if they're not ready to do that, otherwise, I mean, I've had really arrogant, blowhard people, and they're often sometimes some of the best, because once they're really clear on what it is that's getting in their way or actually advantaging them, they're not looking at it, they can really turn the ship sometimes. And that can be really
I agree. I mean, when I have that high egotist, high adjustment person full of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
That it takes work, and it takes, I think you have to be pretty tough to deal with those folks, because if you're not, they're not even going to listen to you, number one. But I find too, once you crack past that outside facade and you help them see how they get in their own way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And then they're coachable, but they're tough being, approaching them. But once you cut through, boom.
That's right. And sometimes they're again, immunity to change. Sometimes that tough exterior is protecting them from themselves, and really having to do that deep work. So if you can build a relationship where you have their trust and they're willing to really go there with you, it can just be such a game changer, because they haven't been able to allow themselves to take a look at how those behaviors are, that might really be keeping them stuck. So agreed, but you're right. It's not always easy. And I've had some very tough conversations with people. I've ended coaching sessions early. I've told people they were full of, BS and, all those things.
No, I mean, you have to, I think the best thing you can do is what you're saying, is being real with people, being clear, being honest, and not sugarcoating,
That's
or not blowing smoke at them. Right.
that's
We're not there to feed their egos. That's not what we're doing. So if people
that's
are looking for
right.
executive coaches, we
And I
might.
think it's our coaching style for you and me. There are other people who have very
Oh
kind
yeah.
of laissez-faire, what's much more kind of, you know, curious, inquisitive kind of approaches. And that may work as well. But for me, this works really well sometimes with those very tough, very successful, very high ego, I'm 800 pounds and bulletproof kind of folks. You and
Yeah,
I.
and I think even, your approach with endurance leadership makes sense because you're going for a goal. You're determined. So you're sometimes that inquiring, sitting back, exploring. You're almost, and I'm a little wired that way too, where, I want to push for results. I'm not here to kind of hang out.
You along. That's right. I'm not here to coddle you. I know
No,
that's
no.
what you're
I'm
looking
here
for.
to move
I can be
forward.
kind. I'm kind, and I can be very loving, and I'm gonna
Right,
also.
exactly. But at the same time, you know, cutting
That's
to
right.
the chase and being able to make progress is very important, I think, rather than
This is why we are friends, my friend. Like we get each other.
yes.
I
So
see you.
I have to. So I'm going to ask you now. This is more CDR oriented. I know sometimes you use CDR assessments with
Absolutely.
your clients. How does that help you? Do you use it up front? Tell us a little bit about when you use those.
It's a very rare condition where I'm not going to use a reflective assessment, the CDR being
Right.
a primary one, where, I understand, leadership is being kind of concentric circles
Right.
of leading self, leading others, leading
Right.
the organization, leading the enterprise. And if we aren't starting with leading self,
Yes.
we're going to eventually be hopeless at leading others. So people who don't know themselves, and the CDR does such a great job of helping people understand like what they value, what motivates them, what drives them, but also how they're showing up, both for the good and for the not so good. And
Right.
when people can really understand those factors, understand what underlies those, and it isn't, I am like you, I am not somebody who believes in the Popeye phenomenon of I am what I am and that's all that I am, right?
Right.
But it is helpful to understand where people are kind of centered, and therefore, as we work to invoke change, what are the inevitable pieces that might be creating friction for them based on who they are? And so it feels to me like it's like this interior roadmap, that you're kind of like, you are here, like here's where you are in your own self, like, and helping people really understand that. And when people get it, they're like, oh, and I love it when I can hear people say back to me like, oh, well, this is my, this is my false advocate speaking, or like whatever they're saying, they've really adopted the language for their own. And especially in situations too, where people might be in the middle of a career transition, the motives and values and drivers is so critical. I now call it the career sorting hat, like the Harry Potter, because it's just so helpful for people. So there are times when that's not the kind of coaching I'm being asked for, but in general, if somebody is really trying to understand where they are and what they need to be doing differently in order to achieve greater success in their leadership, the CDR is like right there.
No, thank you. I agree. And the one thing when you mentioned, the motivation with drivers, what drives you and so forth, it is so important. And when I'm working with coaches and helping coaches, I'm trying to now drive home, more importantly, that tool is so important and we often overlook it, but it has so much value. I mean, the character is great, strengths, and the risks, are kind of different, a little sexy because they're different and interesting. But then, in a weird way. Okay.
Yeah. No, they're very accurate terms for those of you who don't know the CDR. Take it. Call Nancy. Get an opportunity. Take it.
But the drivers, I was just coaching someone yesterday, and even the past couple of weeks, and the drivers, and particularly women in executive and leadership roles. For me, it's also the stress valve. So I use it not only why are you doing this work and where's your passion? But when you do more of this, your risks aren't going to show. You're going to be more relaxed, So anyway,
Right.
you being the
And
licensed psychologist, I mean, for me,
no, it's
that's
great.
like a double benefit, if you
And
will.
the relationship between those and like the mission is
Right.
so clear. Like when
Oh,
people can really
absolutely.
understand, like, oh, wait, I have a very high need for, altruism, and I'm working on Wall Street. Like I might not be so comfortable, right? Like if we're working toward what really drives you and
Right.
makes you, gets the best of you, then maybe you can do that, but let's make sure that you're activating that in a daily.
I love that. I'm not sure I found one on Wall Street bank trading, energy trading that had high,
No, I haven't yet. It doesn't mean they don't exist.
Yeah,
Right?
that's too funny. That was too funny. I'm just saying that's like what? Anyway,
No,
okay. So what words of wisdom do you have for two groups? First, we'll talk about leaders because of endurance leaders, and then second, maybe up and coming executive coaches. So let's talk about leaders. What words of wisdom, suggestions do you have for them to excel?
Yeah. Well, kind of coming back to the book, my first question is life a marathon or is it a series of sprints? And I think that leaders would do well to think that life is both. And if you approach leadership like a constant sprint, or that it's a marathon you're sprinting, or that you're just kind of going from one sprint to the next, if you've ever watched sprinters, that is not sustainable, right?
Right.
So and also if you only see it as a marathon, you're not going to be energized to pick up your effort when you need to, which sometimes we do, right? So really understanding that life is a whole bunch of sprints in it, and understanding when and where and how you need to pick up your efforts and when you need to recover.
Good.
And exhibit what I call pacing, both for yourself and your team. That is going to be, I just think that whole notion is so critical, because people right now just feel like they're in a slog, and then they're being asked to go at 140% all the time. And it's just not sustainable. So that's the advice I'd give to leaders. For coaches, you might know that I just did a little reflection on, 12 years in business for myself. And this is something that's been really important to me, which is really be present with your client. It's so easy, especially when you're new to coaching and you've got all these theories and frameworks and things going on, and you're trying to put the person in like, okay, well, where are they on their continuum and what thing do I need to use? Just be present. That this is what people want most from you. They selected you from a choice of coaches because they liked your presence. And so being still, being intentional, being focused, it is really the best. What we tell our coaches, what we advise, they're helpful, but what people often need most is you to be fully present. So that's my coaching advice. And it's what I'm giving myself every day.
Well, good. That's great. No, that's inspiring. And it's so true. It is their one chance, when you're coaching someone that, that's their getaway, their sounding board, their reflection, the whole thing. It's their kind of precious time for their own development. So
that's exactly right. They have so little time to just have somebody's undivided attention.
Absolutely. And so many people have never had it before like that. It's their first. Usually it's their first time to have that.
Yeah.
So, even at the very senior levels, it's odd, but that's how it is. Yeah.
And people don't have it at home either, because everybody's distracted all the time by their phones, right? So like having undivided attention of another human is really powerful.
Yeah. Right. And turn off your phone so you don't get an emergency alert. That was the first, Ann. That was an absolute first. But it did say there's an armed murder or something running around.
Wow. Okay.
What county it is. It's probably from Texas, but I don't know.
Anyway. Hopefully I'm safe up here in DC, but I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
So So the last question that I have right now for you, though, I know the book is coming and we're all excited. Well, last two questions. What's next for you, or what, short term to long term, what do you see happening? And then, of course, at the end, I want you to restate, how do people contact you? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting time right now. I feel like I'm a little bit on, it's like a crucible moment or time as the book comes out. Now you are an author many times over, so
it's like giving birth.
This rodeo, right? Yes, you've had multiple children. This is my first and only. So there's kind of this notion of what's coming, but it's not quite there. So this is exciting for me. Most of my coaching career and consulting career has really been solely at the executive C-suite kind of level. And the book is really intended to be for leaders, as you and I have been talking about, and other folks have been talking about, that are a little bit, more junior, not necessarily by experience, but by longevity in terms of how much time they have. So I'm excited about the possibilities there. It's really energizing to work with folks who have, a lot of time to continue to focus on their leadership development. So, I think this is going to take me down that road. I'm excited for being able to share these concepts with people, to coach around it, to coach teams, to, work inside organizations. So I think from a professional space, that's next. I have decided to do an Ironman in 2025. It's been 10 years since I've done a full Ironman. So I'm actually going to be raising money I'm hoping to raise $10,000 for Project Purple, which is a nonprofit devoted to raising awareness and providing financial assistance for people with pancreatic cancer diagnoses. As you know, my sister is currently dealing with a pancreatic cancer diagnosis. So that's exciting as well. It brings me back to my mission around creating purpose and clarity in my community as well, and giving back. So I'm excited about that. And my husband is still working and has very little intention to retire until the military absolutely kicks him out. So I think we'll continue to do some travel and continue to do some racing and seeing family. And I think that's what's next. So again, to get in touch with me, easiest way is to reach me at ann@lumos.com, LUMOS.com, or Ann at the enduranceleader.com. And you can find me here on LinkedIn under Dr. Annie B.E. And I'm always up for a good chat about coaching and development and endurance leadership. So please reach out.
Great. And presentations too, as well. So I'm sure we'll be doing many of those on the new book. So congratulations on the upcoming book. Thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Thanks for giving me time to spend with you. It's always delightful.
It was so much. It was great. Thank you, Ann, and best wishes.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks so much.